The door creaks in the darkness. A sleeping nobleman turns over in bed, unaware that death has already crossed the threshold. Among the shadows, a figure breathes in complete silence, and in her hand a short, curved blade that gleams as if it has its own thirst. It's not a sword. It's no ordinary dagger. It is one of 15 brutal daggers used by medieval assassins. Weapons so cruel and precise that they were banned, hidden, or completely erased from official records. Each of these blades was created for a single purpose: to kill fast, to kill at close range, and to ensure that no one discovered the perpetrator. During the Middle Ages, great wars, military orders, and pitched battles typically occupy all the space in history books. But there is another side, a silent, hidden, invisible side, where the fate of kings, crusades, and entire kingdoms was decided not by gleaming swords, but by small, discreet, and utterly brutal blades. This is the world of medieval assassins. Contrary to what many imagine, political assassination was not an exception. It was a diplomatic tool. Agents of rival kingdoms, monks trained in secret warfare, faceless mercenaries, and silent spies moved the chessboard of Europe and the Middle East as much as entire armies. And the weapons they carried were the perfect reflection of this shadow. Compact daggers, crooked blades, reinforced points, hidden hooks, and almost impossible designs, made exclusively to kill at close range and disappear soon after. Some of these daggers were forged to pierce chainmail armor like butter, others for cutting arteries with surgical precision, and some just to ensure the victim didn't make any sound before falling. While knights' swords were symbols of honor, these daggers were symbols of efficiency. While soldiers fought during the day, these assassins worked at night. In this episode, we reveal 15 of the most brutal daggers ever used by medieval assassins. Weapons that were forbidden, lost, or erased by history, but which survived in fragments, obscure manuscripts, and accounts from victims who were lucky enough to live and tell their story. Prepare to explore the hidden side of the medieval era, where a 10-centimeter blade was worth more than an entire army. If you enjoy historical weapons, hidden wars, and deadly technology forgotten by time, subscribe to Blades and Shadows. Leave a like and comment which dagger you found most brutal. This helps the channel reach more people and keep alive a story that few dare to explore. Among all the silent weapons of the Middle Ages, none represents the exact nature of murder as well as the needlepoint stiletto. A stiletto so thin, so narrow, and so sharp that it hardly looked like a weapon. He wasn't raised for dueling. It wasn't made for cutting. Its function was unique. Drill with absolute precision, penetrating between the rings of the chainmail or through the narrowest gaps in the armor. Accounts from 13th century Italian. Cities describe murders committed with a human needle, a blade that left wounds so clean they were only noticed after the body had stopped breathing. Small stilettos were found hidden inside boots, coat sleeves, and hems sewn behind belts, used by hired agents to eliminate bankers, spies, and important messengers. Needle-point stiletto characteristics. Extremely thin blade. At only a few millimeters thick, it was designed to fit through seemingly impossible gaps. It wouldn't bend. It didn't. Freeze. He was crossing. Elongated, needle-shaped tip ideal for piercing the heart, lungs, or internal veins with a single movement. The right blow, at the right angle, killed without needing force. Short cable without guard. Allowing for quick, short, and discreet strikes, often performed with the stiletto hidden in the palm of the hand. Darkened finish. To avoid reflecting light, the assassins couldn't risk revealing their location. Tactical function among medieval assassins, the needlepoint. Stiletto was used almost exclusively for killing targets wearing chainmail, attacks in the dark where larger weapons were useless, silent perforations between ribs, quick blows to the neck or collarbone, eliminate guards without drawing attention. If the sword was a statement, the stiletto was a whisper, or rather, its end. Among all the clandestine weapons used by medieval assassins, few were as ingenious and as cruel as the ring hook garrote dagger. It wasn't just a blade, it was two. Weapons concealed in one. A curved dagger with short penetration and an integrated strangulation system, hidden in a simple metal ring. Assassins from Italian, Syrian, and Balkan guilds used this weapon when they needed to. Absolute control regarding the victim, especially in enclosed spaces where fighting could draw attention. The ring-hook garrote dagger was created to silently immobilize, sever arteries, and ensure that no screams are heard. She was the weapon of those who needed death to be inevitable and inaudible. Characteristics of the ring-hook garrote dagger. Curved dagger with a short, thick blade, designed for quick penetration of the neck, lower abdomen, or area between the ribs. The cut didn't need to be deep, just precise. Metal ring with a small internal hook. The killer was wearing the ring on his index finger. By wrapping the arm around the victim's neck, the hook secured the weapon's leather cord, creating a progressive strangulation without effort. Strong twine wound. Without end, it looked like just a decorative strip, but it was the real garrote. Once tightened, it cut off circulation in seconds. Short handle with anatomical support, allowing for quick switching between strangulation and piercing. Tactical function among medieval assassins, this weapon was used for to immobilize victims silently, murders inside houses, taverns, and alleys, eliminate guards without leaving any signs of a fight, quick blows to the base of the skull or to the neck, executions where the body needed to be removed silently. Many political assassinations were carried out by men who seemed to simply embrace their victims from behind until the body collapsed, without a scream, without warning, without witnesses. The ring-hook garrote dagger was not only lethal, it was infallible. If there is a dagger that reveals the secret war between assassins and medieval armor, it is the split-fang bodkin, a pointed two-part blade specifically designed to pierce chainmail, one of the most commonly used forms of protection during that period. While ordinary daggers would bend or ricochet when attempting to pierce intertwined metal rings, the split-fang bodkin tore through the meshes as if they were fabric. The weapon's appearance was already intimidating, a narrow double point that resembled the fangs of a venomous creature, but the design wasn't symbolic, it was functional. The forked tip pushed the chainmail rings to opposite sides, opening a gap for the blade to penetrate deeply. It was a favorite of assassins hired to eliminate knights, armed messengers, and nobles who were rarely seen without some kind of metal protection. Features of split-fang bodkin forked tip, fangs. The split at the tip created an automatic opening effect for the chainmail, allowing for easier and more devastating penetration. Reinforced triangular blade. The triangular shape provided structural strength, preventing warping when entering metal. Narrow base and tapered handle, designed for precision strikes, especially quick thrusts. Darkened matte finish. These blades rarely gleamed. They were tools of death, not ornaments. Tactical function among medieval assassins. The split-fang bodkin was used for to pierce mesh at vital points, to store between protected ribs, attacking messengers and knights without prolonged combat, to execute armed nobles during ceremonies or journeys, eliminate guards who are equipped but unprepared for a surprise attack. Some accounts mention victims who fell before even realizing they had been hit. The puncture wound was so clean and deep that, at first glance, it looked like just a scratch, until blood began to gush out seconds later. The split-fang bodkin was not elegant. It was surgical. The word compassion suggests compassion, but in the Middle Ages, compassion, she was anything but pious. This long, thin, and rigid dagger was created to deliver the coup de grace to fallen knights on the battlefield. But outside of, formal wars, it became one of the preferred weapons of professional assassins who needed to kill men, armored vehicles, immobilized, or already injured. The clandestine version of this weapon became known as Mercy Breaker Misericord. It was narrower, sharper, and more rigid than the version used by soldiers, specifically designed to penetrate the gaps in armor and hit vital organs with absolute precision. It was the blade used when the target couldn't escape, but still needed to die quickly. Characteristics of the Mercy Breaker Misericord. Narrow and extremely rigid blade designed to drill through tiny gaps between metal plates. It wouldn't bend even with a side impact. Sharp point with micro chamfer. A slight indentation at the tip concentrated even more pressure at that point, increasing its piercing capacity. Longer than a regular dagger. This allowed them to penetrate full suits of armor and reach vital organs, even through the collarbone or armpit. Simple handle, without guard or ornament. It was a functional weapon, not a symbol. He held on tight during deep drillings. Tactical function among medieval assassins. The Mercy Breaker Misericord was especially used for eliminate fallen knights before they rise again, piercing weak points in the armor, armpit, collarbone, base of the neck, lower part of the helmet, discreet assassinations in aristocratic settings where guards wore armor, silent executions of important prisoners, quick finishes after ambushes, many. Assassination contracts stipulated clean death without excessive bloodshed. The Misericord was perfect for this, deep enough to kill quickly, precise enough to avoid screams. French chroniclers report victims who fell before even understanding the blow. Such was the efficiency of the blade. Mercy Breaker showed no mercy. She lived up to her name in a cruel way. It freed the target from life and from suffering in a single movement. While many associate these acts among the Germanic and Saxon peoples, few know its darker version, a clandestine adaptation created specifically for silent assassinations during the High Middle Ages. This rare variation, now called by historians Night Veil Seaxit, transformed a blade that was originally utilitarian into a precise and terrifying tool for eliminating targets at night. The common seax was a wide, sturdy knife used for everything: cutting wood, preparing food, improvised defense. But the Night Veil was something completely different. Longer, heavier at the tip, and with a wire so polished that it reflected only the slightest light, as if it absorbed the rest. Some reports describe victims found with long, deep wounds and almost no blood spatter around them, evidence of the anatomical precision of this modified blade. It wasn't a peasant's knife, it was a hunter's weapon, not for animals, but for men. Night Veil Seax features wide blade with a broken back tip. This design allowed for short, devastating blows to vulnerable areas such as the groin, armpit, and lower abdomen, ideal spots for quick, silent kills. Weight concentrated in the front third of the blade. This facilitated deep cuts with little movement, perfect for attacks in alleys, forests, and dark rooms. Partially sharpened back edge, the assassin could reverse the grip and cut while pulling, multiplying attack angles in tight spaces. Darkened wooden handle with non-slip texture, designed to maintain stability even in chaotic situations, often involving sweat, mud, or blood. Tactical function among medieval assassins. The Night Veil Seax was especially used for ambush attacks on roads and in taverns, murders during sleep, cutting internal arteries with short movements, ambushes against travelers or nobles protected by hardened leather, clashes in dense forests where long blades were useless. It was also the weapon of choice for assassins who needed to appear as ordinary peasants. The Seax was so common among Germanic peoples that carrying one didn't raise suspicion, but this lethal version could rip a man in half before he could utter a single scream. There are Saxon chronicles that describe night attacks in which the wounds were so clean that survivors believed they had been attacked by something that walked silently. The Night Veil Seax was not just a blade, it was a shadow with a thread. Among all the weapons used by assassins in the medieval East, none evokes as much fear in historical records as the poison channel conjar, a curved dagger, sharp as an animal's fang, specially constructed to carry and inject venom during a strike. The weapon originated in Persian, Afghan, and Indian regions, where knowledge of plant toxins, resins, and animal compounds was extremely advanced. This khanjar wasn't just made for cutting, it was made for infect. Arab and Persian chronicles recount deaths in which the wound seemed too small to kill, but the symptoms, paralysis, convulsions, respiratory collapse, appeared minutes later. It is likely that these attacks were carried out with versions of this deadly blade, whose internal design was more complex than most people imagine. Assassins preferred this weapon because it did the dirty work on its own. A single cut, sometimes as light as a scratch, was enough to guarantee death. Characteristics of poison channel khanjar: curved blade with a hollow groove, channel. Along the inner wire ran a shallow channel, designed to carry liquid or paste-like poison. At the moment of the cut, the canal released the contents directly into the bloodstream. Wide, slightly angled tip. This geometry facilitated diagonal cuts that opened the skin enough to allow the venom to enter. Porous metal at the base of the channel. Some versions had tiny microscopic pores, allowing toxins to adhere to the blade for extended periods, useful for prolonged missions. Curved handle for quick thrusts. The design favored upward strokes, perfect for targeting areas rich in blood vessels. Tactical function. Among medieval assassins, the poison channel conjar was used when the target needed to die far from the location. It was necessary to avoid shouting. If he desired a slow but certain death, the killer needed to escape without raising suspicion. To eliminate leaders, messengers, or political rivals discreetly. Kill guards protected by reinforced leather assassins didn't need to drill deep. A shallow cut on the forearm, thigh, or rib was sufficient. By the time the victim began to feel weak or had difficulty breathing, the perpetrator was already miles away. Poison and blade worked together as a single instrument. Among the most brutal weapons ever wielded by South Asian assassins during the Middle Ages, none was as feared as the bone-shear kukri, a clandestine and enhanced version of the famous Nepalese kukri. Although the traditional kukri was used by warriors in open fields, the model adapted for assassinations was heavier at the tip, shorter, and had a blade so aggressively curved that it functioned almost like a portable guillotine. This kukri was not used for silent drilling. It was a weapon made for quick, decisive, and mutilating blows, capable of piercing bones and joints with frightening ease. Tibetan and Nepalese chronicles record nighttime attacks where victims were found with cuts so deep that it was difficult to distinguish wounds from partial decapitations. Assassins didn't choose him for his subtlety. They chose based on certainty, characteristics of bone-shear kukri aggressive curvature, almost crescent-shaped. This geometry concentrated all the force of the blow in the first few millimeters of the blade, producing cuts capable of opening muscles and bones with minimal effort. Extremely sharp inner wire and heavy at the tip. The forward weight transformed the kukri into a blade capable of both impact and cutting. A single movement could completely incapacitate the target. Reinforced thickness in the blade column. This prevented the weapon from bending or jamming when it encountered bone, making it effective even against opponents using tough leather. Short handle made of hardwood, it facilitated quick and repeated strikes, essential in ambushes where the assassin had only seconds to act. Tactical function among medieval assassins, bone-shear kukri was especially used for rapid frontal attacks in alleys and narrow passages, brutal ambushes against travelers and guards, eliminate targets wearing light armor, cut off limbs. Before the enemy could react, direct executions when subtlety was not necessary, clashes against groups, since a single blow could incapacitate accounts from the time-described attacks where the target fell with the first blow, not from blood loss, but from shock and structural destruction. In some cases, armed guards were knocked down before they had time to raise their shields. This was not the soldier's kukri. It was the kukri of the silent executioner. Among the most ingenious hidden weapons of medieval Europe, none rivals the ingenuity of the silent claw main gauche, a banned version of the famous left-hand French style used in duels. While the traditional model was designed to parry swords and protect the fencer, the clandestine variant was completely different, shorter, narrower, with internal hooks and secondary blades designed not for defense, but for capture, break, and kill. Assassins trained in the back alleys of Paris, Marseille, and Florence carried this weapon hidden, under their cloaks. Silent Claw didn't rely on strength. It relied on precision, brutality, and surprise. The weapon could grip the opponent's blade, pull it, twist it, and in the same movement open the target's throat or abdomen. She was the perfect weapon for assassins who needed to eliminate skilled swordsmen. In experienced hands, it transformed defenses into instant attacks. Features of the Silent Claw main: left narrow blade with double internal hooks. The hooks were positioned to capture the enemy's sword. With a slight twist of his wrist, the assassin could to disarm, to break the opponent's wire, or pull the opponent closer. Reinforced tip for short drilling jobs. The short, rigid, and slightly expanded tip allowed for quick punctures between the ribs, ideal for low-amplitude strikes. Hidden secondary blades, claws. Small side blades would open when the weapon caught something, functioning like internal razors. Once caught, cutting was inevitable. Short guard, without ornamentation. It was designed to go unnoticed, the opposite of the elegant main gauche worn by duelists. Tactical function among medieval assassins. A Silent Claw main gauche era a arma ideal para ambushes against experienced swordsmen, fights in taverns, stairways, and narrow corridors, capturing enemy weapons before the target notices, quick blows to the neck and abdomen, silent disarmaments and political missions. Executions where the victim needed to be immobilized first, the killers reported that the weapon fought on its own. Once the enemy blade was caught by the hooks, the main gauche's own structure guided the next strike. It was a weapon for those who knew how to fight, but also for those who knew how to kill. The basilard was a relatively common dagger in medieval Europe, long, straight, and double-edged. But the version used by Swiss, German, and Italian assassins was anything but ordinary. Court documents from the 14th and 15th centuries mention a special type of leather, so sharp that it tore leather like silk, and so light that it could be hidden inside the lining of a cloak. This variant became known as razor-edge basilard, the basilard of razor wire. Unlike the utilitarian blades used by soldiers, this clandestine version was extremely thin, almost impossibly sharp, treated with repeated polishing and tempering techniques that blacksmiths kept secret. Assassins carried him because he met two essential requirements: speed and precision. A single blow at the right angle was enough to cut through muscles, tendons, and even cartilage without any perceptible resistance. It wasn't a thrusting dagger, it was a dagger of open. Features of the basilard razor edge: extremely thin double wire, both sides were as sharp as razors. This allowed the strike to continue even if the assassin missed the initial angle. Narrow central section, reduced fracture line. The blade had a minimal thickness in the middle, allowing for cuts that glided through the meat with unusual ease. Long blade, but surprisingly light. The internal structure was hollow in some places, something very rare for weapons of that period, reducing weight without compromising rigidity. Reinforced tip for tearing thrusts. Although it was a cutting blade, its sharp point was capable of penetrating, and upon withdrawal, the blade left a larger gash than that of a common dagger. Tactical function among medieval assassins. The basilard razor edge was perfect. For quick attacks on the neck or armpit, deep cuts in the abdomen that prevented the victim from reacting, short battles against experienced guards, ambushes in Darkhold, eliminate messengers before they could escape. Confrontations where silence and speed were crucial. Court reports indicate victims whose wounds were so clean that the local doctor initially believed them to be surgical cuts. The blade was so sharp that often the victim only realized they had been struck seconds later. The basilard de fio navalha was, in essence, the brutal evolution of the European dagger, the weapon of choice for those who needed to ensure that a single blow would be enough. The crusade is a traditional weapon from Southeast Asia, famous for its wavy blade and spiritual symbolism. But the version used by assassins during the late Middle Ages was something completely different. A dark, hidden, brutal adaptation that never appeared in ceremonies or rituals. This deadly variation became known as hooked midnight the Karis of midnight, hooked. While the traditional Karis was a symbol of honor and lineage, the midnight Karis was a symbol of efficiency, cunning, and silent death. Its wavy blade had discreet hooks at the inflection points, almost invisible to the untrained eye, designed to grip flesh, tissue, and muscle as it entered, and violently tear as it exited. It was not a weapon for knights. It was a weapon for those who needed to kill quickly and disappear before the alarms sounded. Characteristicas do hooked midnight Karis wavy blade with micro hooks. The undulations of the Karis were already creating wounds that were difficult to suture. With internal hooks, these wounds became devastating, tearing open the inside of the body as the blade was removed. High-purity steel with Damascus patterns. The regional blacksmiths mastered advanced metallurgy, producing a flexible and sharp steel. The midnight Karis was even more refined, heat-treated multiple times to ensure a long-lasting strand. Wide base and narrow tip, designed for quick punctures followed by angled cuts, a move capable of instantly incapacitating even an armed opponent. Curved and ergonomic handle, designed for short, precise, and repetitive strikes, ideal for small spaces or surprise attacks. Tactical function among medieval assassins. Hooked midnight Karis was used for silent attacks inside homes and rooms, upward blows to the diaphragm and lower ribs, ritual killings that required immediate death, ambushes at markets, ceremonies, or political meetings, eliminate targets wearing light layers of ceremonial clothing, causing internal injuries that are impossible to treat. Trained assassins claimed that the Karis fought on its own. The wavy blade guided unexpected cuts, difficult to predict and impossible to block in close combat. Javanese accounts mention targets falling without understanding what had happened, after only a seemingly light blow. Upon examining the wound, doctors saw deep, irregular cuts that pierced internal tissues as if they had been torn from the inside. The hooked midnight keris was more than just a weapon. It was a verdict. The rondelet was a common dagger in medieval Europe, easily identified by its rigid triangular blade. But there was an extremely rare and dangerous version used by professional assassins and military agents operating on the borders of the Holy Roman Empire. This variation became known as double-spine rondoltha double-spine rondo, a refined weapon designed to pierce with surgical precision and inflict maximum internal damage without relying on excessive force. Its main characteristic? A double internal structure, as if two central columns ran the length of the blade from end to end, creating superior rigidity and a twisting effect that devastated the body's interior when the dagger was twisted after penetration. This technique, taught only to the most experienced assassins, transformed a simple thrust into a lethal blow that tore through organs, blood vessels, and muscles in fractions of a second. The double-spine rondel was considered so deadly that in some regions, possessing it was tantamount to confessing intent to murder. Features of the double-spine rondolph triangular blade with two internal columns, spines. These spines increased the blade's resistance and created rupture channels that tore through the inside of the target when the handle was twisted. Reinforced piercing tip, designed to penetrate. Toughened leather, chainmail, and in some cases, even joints between metal plates. Symmetrical shape for reverse shots. The assassin could stab and, in the same movement, withdraw the weapon in the opposite direction, increasing the damage. Cylindrical handle with full grip. The rounded handle allowed for rapid rotation to activate the blade's lethal mechanism. Tactical function among medieval assassins. The double-spine rondolph was primarily used to pierce rigid armor and reach internal organs, deep stab wounds in the armpit, collarbone, or areas between plates, twisting blows that caused immediate bleeding, discreet assassinations in narrow corridors, eliminate guards who wore heavy armor, quick finishes after ambushes. Surviving soldiers described a sensation of being torn apart from the inside, even when the external wound was relatively small. This is because the twisting of the dagger created internal destruction that no medicine of the time could treat. If the gay assassination needed to be guaranteed, regardless of the armor, the double-spine rondel was the perfect choice. A jambia is famous in the Arab and Yemeni world for its elegant curved shape and cultural value. But during the Middle Ages, a dark version, intended exclusively for assassins and hired mercenaries, gained a sinister reputation. She became known as Gut Reaper Jambia, a jambia harvest viscera, built to pierce through layers of tissue and flesh with brutal efficiency. Unlike the ceremonial jambia, used in costumes and rituals, the assassin's variant had a more aggressive curve and a larger blade volume near the tip. With this, the coup not only penetrated, but it ripped off, pulling muscles, fat, and organs without needing great strength. Yemeni and Persian accounts tell of attacks where a single stab ripped the man open like a sack. It was a weapon designed to generate internal chaos and certain death. Features of Gut Reaper Jambia deep curve with a thick blade at the tip. This design increased traction when withdrawing the weapon, causing devastating injuries without relying on wide strikes. Expanded internal cut. The inner face of the blade had a slightly steeper angle, widening the cut during pulling strokes. Reinforced rear pillar, allowing the weapon to withstand impacts against bones without deforming. Inverted T-shaped cable. It offered absolute control of the blade, especially during upward thrusts, the favorite strike of assassins of the time. Tactical function among medieval assassins. The Gut Reaper Jambia was the weapon of choice for ambushes in the desert or narrow vies, attacks against travelers and nobles with light armor, short blows below the ribs, diagonal perforations in the abdomen, causing internal bleeding that is impossible to treat. Executions where the victim needed to fall quickly. Assassins who trained with this weapon learned to strike vulnerable points with short, sweeping movements. One blow to the ribcage, one strong pull, and the target collapsed without a chance to react. At Gut Reaper, Jambia was never loaded in sight. It was hidden beneath cloaks, sewn into inner belts, and when it appeared, it was to finish off a fight, not to threaten. Among all the piercing weapons of the Middle Ages in South Asia, the train he was already feared for his ability to pierce through armor as if it were cloth. But the assassins operating in the kingdoms of Rajasthan and the Deccan used an even more cruel version. A clandestine adaptation developed specifically for killing quickly, at close range, and irreversibly. This variant became known as spikeback Katar iron spine. Unlike the common Katar, whose wide, rigid blade was used for powerful thrusts, the spikeback had a monstrously efficient internal architecture. Small metal spines positioned on the back of the blade, designed to tore the wound open when removing the weapon, multiplying the internal damage. It was not a weapon for dueling, it was a weapon for execution. Features of spikeback Katar metal spines on the back of the blade. Small, sharp, almost imperceptible protrusions that went in smoothly, but tore brutally on the way out. They caused instant hemorrhaging and tissue destruction. Short, thick, and triangular blade. The triangular geometry concentrated power in the center, allowing it to pierce even tough leather armor and dense chainmail. Double-handled grip, H-shaped. The traditional Katar design, with parallel shafts, allowed for extremely controlled and direct strikes, transforming the assassin's hand into a veritable battering ram. Reinforced structure for repetitive attacks. The spikeback was designed for stalking, removing, tearing, and repeating, all in a matter of seconds. Tactical function among medieval assassins. The spikeback Katar was used for quick punctures in the chest, collarbone, or sternum, blows that needed to kill before the victim could react, to cut through light armor with surprising brutality, eliminate guards who used hardened leather, direct attacks in corridors or alleys, silent ritual executions of political rivals. Chronicles from southern India describe victims who fell like broken statues, unable to breathe or move after a single blow, a result of the internal destruction caused by the spines on the blade's back. The assassins who used this weapon trained to aim between the ribs and at the solar plexus, where a well-placed impact was enough to instantly incapacitate. The spikeback Katar was not only deadly, it was an instrument of instant collapse. Among the Germanic and Nordic peoples, the scramasaxet was a utilitarian blade, a tool for hunting, defense, and daily use. But during the late medieval period, a clandestine version began circulating among bandits, spies, and itinerant assassins. A thinner, longer blade, sharp enough to cut through the air with an almost hissing sound. This variant became known as wind-shear scramasax the scramasax, windbreaker. Anglo-Saxon and Frankish accounts mention attacks where victims claimed to have heard only a cutting breath before the pain hit. The distinctive sound came from the aerodynamic design of the blade, built to cut through the air silently, yet at extreme speed. The resulting cut was deep and clean, perfect for assassins who needed to eliminate targets while walking, without even stopping. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a coup in motion. Wind-shear scramasax features thin blade, slightly curved forward. This angle allowed for devastating horizontal cuts, especially in the neck and collarbone area. Asymmetrical sharpening, wind-shear grind. One side of the blade was polished in a convex shape, while the other had a concave chamfer. This combination created the characteristic sound and further increased its cutting power. Intermediate length, ideal for quick side strikes. Larger than a knife, smaller than a short sword. The perfect size for mobility and impact. Long. Handle with carved wood texture, allowing absolute control during fluid movements, like a natural extension of the arm. Tactical function among medieval assassins. The wind-shear scramasax was especially used for quick attacks in alleys, markets, and roads, cutting throats in motion, a technique called shear pass, incapacitate guards without breaking through heavy armor, eliminate messengers before they react, circular attacks against multiple nearby opponents, discreet executions during riots. Assassins trained with this weapon practiced continuous movements, where a single step to the side, combined with a wrist rotation, produced a deep and almost undetectable cut from a distance. Frank accounts tell of victims who only realized they had been attacked seconds later, when blood was already streaming down their chests. The scramasax windbreaker didn't need any power. I needed precision, and speed. The dagger. The Roman rifle was already a respected weapon for its accuracy and reliability, but during the Middle Ages it gained a new life in the hands of assassins operating between Italy, Byzantium, and North Africa. These agents adopted, modified, and improved the original design, creating a clandestine version. The Iron-Crescent dagger, the half-moon iron puppet. A short, heavy, well-balanced weapon that was brutally efficient at quick thrusts and curved cuts. A perfect combination for those who needed to kill discreetly and disappear. The blade was shaped like an inverted crescent moon, something no ordinary soldier would carry. This curvature allowed for deep blows that tore as they penetrated. The internal impact was devastating. Perforated organs, instant chest injuries, hemorrhages impossible to control with the medicine of the time. Assassins hired by Italian noble families, Byzantine spies, and Moorish mercenaries knew the blade's reputation. If he got it right once, it would be over right there. Features of the Iron-Crescent Pugio short blade with E, aggressive inward curve. Designed for upward or pulling strikes, creating wide wounds with minimal movement. Reinforced thickness at the blade root, allowing for drilling even against lightweight reinforcement and flexible dimensions. Double tip, crescent point. A bifurcated and slightly concave shape that widened the internal opening when the weapon was removed. Heavy-duty cable with an advanced center of gravity, facilitating quick and repetitive strikes, perfect for close-range ambushes. Tactical function among medieval assassins. The Iron-Crescent Pugio was used for rapid attacks against targets with light armor, puncture wounds in the chest and abdomen, upward strikes beneath armor and cloaks, eliminate messengers, diplomats, or political rivals, quick deaths in taverns, small rooms or corridors, silent strikes with minimal movement. Byzantine accounts mention victims who collapsed after a touch, without realizing they had been deeply pierced by a curved blade, a typical feature of the half-moon Pugio. Assassins did not carry this weapon into open confrontations. They took them when the order was clear: one blow, one death. If you enjoyed this dive into the hidden side of the Middle Ages, full of deadly engineering, forbidden blades, and stories that have almost disappeared from the world, subscribe to Blades and Shadows. Hit the like button, share the video, and comment which of these daggers you found most brutal. Each interaction you make helps keep this exploration of forgotten weapons alive, and allows us to continue uncovering secrets that history has tried to hide.